morning, everybody, and welcome to this Tech Talk seminar on certificate management. I am Maren Mahoney. I'm an instructor at Sunset Learning Institute, and this is one of those topics that, along with, what are all those certificates and how do I assign certificates and all that stuff, that I've gleaned information, bit by bit over the years. And while there certainly are, YouTube videos and documentation out there that talk about how to do these various things, it took me a long time to really get my brain around it. So what my goal is for you guys today is to hopefully give you a good, comprehensive, basic understanding of managing your certificates. Now, we are going to go through the process of signing a certificate. Well, actually, no. Well, maybe. I haven't decided yet. I did that in the last Tech Talk webinar. I actually went through the process of signing a certificate and uploading it and all that good stuff. So I may not do that. I am going to do a bulk certificate exchange. And we are going to talk about how to generate multi-server SANs. So I'm going to at least show you the interface. While we're going through the seminar today, if you have any questions, please feel free to just go off mute and let me know. And don't be shy. Don't feel like you have to wait for the end to ask a question or anything. All right, so here we go. All right, okay. So we're going to talk about the process of signing a certificate, and with the focus on, how do we generate the information for our certificate signing request? Truthfully, the differences between having an internal certificate authority and an external certificate authority signing a certificate isn't that big a difference, other than, obviously, if you're using an internal certificate authority and you make a mistake, yeah, it's much easier to sort of get by that and do it again or something like that. If you start making mistakes with the public certificate authority, it can cause some real problems. So, I always recommend, if you're going to be trying to do anything, do it in a lab first if you possibly can, and then just read and practice best you can. Okay. We are also going to talk about the purpose of the certificate a subject alternate name, SANs. SANs are very, very important in certificate generation to make sure that the certificates, because certificates, obviously are used for encryption, but they are also used for authentication. Are you the thing I'm trying to touch? Are you who you say you are? And the ability to have other names by which I can be known is the main purpose of a certificate alternate name, a subject alternate name. And it's really important in certain circumstances. You have to have those in place and proper for things to work properly. We're going to look at certificate generation. When do you need to regenerate certificates? What's the process for regenerating certificates? It's not hard, but again, it's one of those things that can make you very anxious when you're doing it, because if you do it wrong, what's going to happen? We're going to look at the certificate monitoring service, and then talk about the bulk certificate management process and some new stuff since Call Manager 9. So here we go. So a quick reminder of the different kinds of certificates that you have in your Call Manager environment. The Tomcat certificate is used anytime I'm maybe touching a GUI or making any kind of an HTTP call. This includes, by the way, if you have a Cisco IP phone and you use the directories button or the services button, that's an HTTP call. And that does use the Tomcat authentication to do that, especially if you're doing it in a secure manner. The Tomcat service and the TFTP service also are affected by that. So if you need to make changes to your TFTP system, it is the Tomcat service or the Tomcat certificate that you would need to work with. The IPsec, if you are actually generating an IPsec tunnel from your Call Manager to another system, obviously that would use that. That's relatively rare unless you're doing encrypted communications with like an MGCP gateway or whatnot. But that is also used if you are working with your backup, so your disaster recovery system. Call Manager, this is the self-signed root certificate. And it's generated automatically when you do your installation. It is the node name, the global unique name. This is the server certificate. So the Call Manager service. Services provided by the Call Manager. So CTI, if you're doing IVR stuff, via encryption. If you're providing secure media for like a media resource server like Music on Hold, and you're doing that in an encrypted format, that's all the call manager server certificate. CAPF, certificate authority proxy function. If you are working with encrypted clusters and you're issuing certificates to phones, and that may sound like a big thing, but it's actually really increasingly popular because of Expressway. To optimize media path, we're talking about that this afternoon, to optimize media path in an Expressway environment, MRA environment, going into multi-mode where you have both encrypted and non-encrypted devices, and then issuing those remote devices certificates can make some really interesting things happen with media pathing. TVS, Trust Verification Service. This is really important, and it works with this ITL recovery certificate. And what this allows you to do is have your phones trust things. The ITL that your phone downloads is verified using the TVS to have the phone understand all the servers that it should trust. And it would include portions of all of these certificates. Anytime you make a change to any of these certificates, providing you just give it a quick wait, the ITL recovery, the ITL, they all get automatically sort of updated, and you don't have to worry about things too much. If you are going to be regenerating your ITL recovery because you do a substantial change to your cluster, there's a process for that too. Like with all of this, I highly encourage you to read and then read it a second time before you start touching stuff. Anyway, just quick overview. Okay, so let's talk about signing certificates. Step one in signing certificates is deciding what information you want in your certificate. You're going to be generating a certificate signing request, a CSR, and that is going to include, the most important thing there is the SAN, the subject alter name. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Up through Call Manager 10.0, if I needed to sign multiple certificates in my cluster, I had to do them one at a time. And you can imagine, if you've got 8, 10 servers in your cluster, and you wanted to sign, all of your major, systems, Tomcat and Call Manager and all that, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of individual work, and that's a real pain in the backside. So starting with Call Manager 10.5, when you generate a certificate, you can make a certificate signing request. It can be a multi-server CSR, and I'm going to show you that process here in just a second. So then you would take that CSR, you would sign the certificate with your CA, and then download that cert. In order for your cluster to trust the certificate that you just generated, you have to tell it how to go about verifying the signatures in that certificate. So you need to go get the root CA certificate and upload that first as a trust. So if I'm going to be generating a Call Manager certificate, I'm assigning it, then I need to upload this as a Call Manager trust. If I'm going to be signing a TFTP certificate, then I would need to make sure I have the Tomcat, it uploaded as a Tomcat trust, etc. Now, you would need all of the root CA's certificates going back to the main public certificate authority. And that again, you may be 3 or 4 CAs down, interim CAs down. Your service provider, this is especially true if you're doing external certificate authorities, they may be 3 or 4 removed from the public CA. There is a PKCS 7, which is a certificate chain. It's a single file that includes the signatures going back to the public. And so then you can, don't have to, again, install multiple certificates. So you would upload your roots first as the trust, and then you would upload the signed certificates and then restart the affected services. We demonstrated this in the last one. I'm not going to talk about it other than the certificate signing request itself. Let's take a quick peek at, I wanted to get rid of that. I'm logged into a OS GUI for my 12.5 server. And if I'm going to be creating a certificate signing request, I go to Certificate Management, and it will refresh itself. There we go. I'm going to generate a CSR. And when you generate a CSR, I can generate it for each individual one. As a side note, if you're not familiar with what ECDSA stands for, there are two different ways of doing asymmetric encryption. There's RSA, which has been around for a long time, and then there's elliptical curve cryptography, ECC. ECC is the mathematical process. ECDSA is the encryption, the asymmetric encryption algorithm that uses the elliptical curve cryptography to do the same thing basically that RSA does, but with shorter keys and better security. So Call Manager is starting to support those, but that's that other kind. If you're doing both kinds, you need to have both of them. So let's just say I'm going to do the Tomcat cert. But then for my distribution, notice I can either say that I want to do just this server, or I can make it a multi-server SAN. And if we wait just a second, notice that it's going to populate with all of the servers that this cluster knows about based on what's in the server list. So I now get all of the servers. It's still just the Tomcat. I would have to separately sign Call Manager and separately sign anything else, but I get to do that. And I've got this parent domain here, but what if I had some subdomains? It is possible now, this is how I would add subject alternate names. So this is all pod2.sli.suclabs.com, but if I want each of these servers to be known by another subdomain, maybe just sli.suclabs.com, for instance, I need to have a text file. Actually, can it do it down here? Yeah. Oh, look at that. I didn't realize that was there. So what this will now do is add as the SANs, not just all of these, but now also sub-hq-2.sli.suclabs.com. So now I get all of that, and it's in a single cert, multi-server. It's beautiful. I can then upload these to back to my Call Manager publisher, and because my publisher is going to be my certificate server for my cluster, this does get distributed, and that's a good thing. Specify whether you're doing the RSA or the elliptical curve. What do you want your key length to be? And which hash algorithm. The defaults are fine unless you've got a good reason not to. So there you go. And that's the multi-server CSR. And I love that they allow us to now do that. The only thing I'd say other than that is the CSR. Once you generate a CSR, the Call Manager system will track the fact that that CSR has been generated. And so you can only have one CSR outstanding at a time. Until the server certificate gets uploaded, based on this CSR itself is still in effect. If you generate a new CSR, the old one gets thrown away first. And then if you want to upload the cert, it has to be based on the new CSR. Any questions about signing certificates? Does anybody want me to go through and demonstrate all of this? No? Okay. I'm actually going to click on generate there, and I'm going to let it, we'll probably go look at it in a bit so we can see all the information in it.
Hi, Marin.
Yes, sir.
My name's Tony. I do have a quick question, and I think you gave a really great presentation of the process. I found it challenging too, but you learned how to negotiate it. But one question I had on the multi-server SAN, I ran into a cluster where my friends had created different passwords for what would be like the CUCM administrative user. So like maybe the username was both administrator, but they had different passwords. And what I noticed,
you're talking about the OS admin, the OS password?
Yeah, I noticed there were some, like no one should ever do that. But when I ran into it, I noticed like when I tried to generate the multi-server SAN, CUCM actually asked me for the subscribe because I like had you got to log into one of the servers with the OS admin password to get to that page you're showing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when it tried to do whatever it was doing with the other server that had a different password, it actually asked me to re-authenticate, which I did, and I was able to do the CSR. So I thought everything was good. When I uploaded the certificate I received after making the CSR, it failed to propagate to the subscriber. And it took me a while to figure it out, but I think it was because
Of
having
that
different,
password, you'd have to manually, it won't distribute automatically, then you'd have to to upload it. Now, once you do upload it, then because it's exchanged via Tomcat, they should automatically replicate after that. But you're getting that initial certificate uploaded. I can totally see why you would have to do that by hand.
Okay. And my question is like, does it normally happen automatically? Like the only one I tried, it was kind of a corner case where the passwords were different. So I'm trying to look forward to our other standalone clusters. Like, should I expect to just upload the multi-SAN certificate once to the publisher and it should replicate, or do I expect to have to go to every subscriber and
Well,
upload it?
it's what you've talked about is not a corner case. There are lots and lots of organizations that have their OS passwords on each of their systems different. I personally don't do that in my labs because it's crazy enough as it is. But if the OS passwords are different, then absolutely you'd have to manually upload those to each of the servers. The
Thanks.
consolidated certificate.
Thanks, Maren.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've not run into that personally, but I'm thinking about how the system works, and I can't see it working any other way. I don't think you ran into anything that was like, weird. That seems very normal to me.
Yeah, it asked me to authenticate when I made the CSR, but then when I uploaded the certificate, it didn't ask me to authenticate. So then it didn't propagate, I'm assuming.
Well, keep in mind that when you're in the OS GUI and you are going to be uploading files, that does have to happen individually. And I think about, just as one example, if you're uploading music on hold audio files, you have to go to each of your media servers and upload that individually because it is a per server kind of thing.
I see.
And which is kind of cool because then you can have the same index number do two different musics depending on which server you're pointing at. And so same thing. The generation allows Call Manager, because it already currently trusts those other servers, to reach out the server saying, "Oh, I don't want to do this until you authenticate yourself via the OS." Okay, let me do that. Get my server SAN. But then I'm in this GUI when I'm uploading it. It did used to be back in the way back days that if you did these kinds of certificates, you did have to manually upload that to each server by hand always. So the fact that it propagates and distributes itself now is just because Cisco's been nice about it. So I'm not surprised.
I see. That's a great example. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.
That answers it.
Cool. All right. So let's download that CSR. Yeah. Save file. Oh man. I'm trying to think about, I don't have a parser handy for looking at the subject alternate name. Somebody brought one up yesterday. Hold on just a second. Hey, I should have brought this. I wouldn't even think about this. I wasn't expecting to do this.
If you get the certificate loaded and you browse to the CUCM like administrative web page, you get that little lock in the browser. On my browser, you can click the lock and see the cert, and then you can see the subject alternate name without a parser.
Yeah, if it has been generated, if the certificate's been generated, you can. That's what you're like right here.
Yes.
I'm seeing this certificate for this. I'm just want to look at the CSR itself, and until the certificate's generated, it's not in use. So let me open this. Here's my file. I'm going to open that with Notepad++. Let me bring that down. So Control A, Control C. I will go to this parser. and check CSS. And there we go. Additional CSR information, and here are my my subject alternate names. So there you go. So that shows you the information that's in your certificate. And this is indeed the information I put in when I built my systems. So, okay, cool. So again, I'm not going to go through the process of actually signing the certificate because I did that earlier. If anybody really wants to see it, stick around afterwards and I'll be happy to show you how all that works. The only thing I'd say is when you're done signing the certificate, just make sure you restart affected services. The nice thing is if you go into the security guide and you read about the certificates, because they have a whole chapter on it, right? It will tell you for this certificate, restart these services. For this certificate, restart these services. So subject alternate names. These provide me additional known by names for my certificate, which provide authentication without going through that invalid cert kind of thing. One example, when I am generating certificates in my lab, I often will add as a subject alternate name the IP address of the server. Don't do that in a production environment, but an IP address of the server so that I can go https:// IP CCM admin. And because that's included as a subject alternate name, then I'm not going to get the certificate is invalid error, right? Another example, when I built the Microsoft Exchange server, I wanted to be able to use Outlook Web Access so that students could use the Exchange server easily during class. So one of the things I added in was owa.sli.cuclabs.com as a subject alternate name to the Exchange server itself. And poof, you can now type that in and it totally works. Also, if you have multi-domain environments and you would like to include the first level subdomains, so for instance, for Cisco.com, when they generate their primary certificates, they can include in a wildcard certificate and add in things like star.cisco.com. Oops. Star.cisco.com. And what this allows it to do is, with a single certificate, provide authentication for support.cisco.com and tools.cisco.com and partners.cisco.com, et cetera, without having to have a separate certificate for each of those subdomains. There are certain certificates based on the environment that cannot have a SAN. And as an example, if you're setting up the Expressway CE pair for MRA, and now what I'm talking about here is if you get the $0 license keys and all that for MRA, not the full-blown Expressway C's and E's, because those are expensive, but the one you kind of get if you're doing cool licensing, right? When you're setting up the traversal tunnel for the MRA purpose, you're going to have a certificate for the C and the E so they can set that tunnel up, and that cannot have a SAN in it or the traversal tunnel will fail. So there's an example of when you can't. Now, just to make your brains hurt, if you do have the full-blown CE pair and you're going to have your Expressway E to do certain things like business to business, and most especially if you're going to have a WebEx hybrid, where you have, you've got your call manager environment, you've got your C, you've got your E going through the internet, and you're talking to WebEx. And then WebEx Teams clients that I register to WebEx itself also go through the process of registering themselves to Call Manager as a CSF device. So they're effectively an on-prem phone, but still part of WebEx itself, the WebEx Teams client. In a case like that, you have to have certain SANs, and they have to be in certain ways in order to do this external e-certificate. The nice part is, in that particular case, when you generate this and you say, hey, you tell the system when you're building it, hey, I'm generating a WebEx hybrid certificate, it puts the SANs in there for you, which is kind of nice. And I did just show you the multi-server certificate. So this is really important. You have to think carefully about what SANs you want as part of your certificate. Make sure you spell them right, obviously. And again, doubly true if you are planning to work with an external certificate authority to do your signing, so that, because you don't want to have to redo it. And check with them as well. The certificate authorities should allow you to have whatever SANs you want, but there are some restrictions on what they will and won't do. So, always check with your provider. So, as it happens, you build your call manager servers. The self-signed certificates that are in those servers are good for 5 years from the date of installation. What happens if you're still using your servers internally and 5 years pass and you have not regenerated the certificates? They will expire, and that will affect certain things. Again, just as one example, I press the services button or the directories button on the phone. That's an HTTP or an HTTPS call going back to call manager. If that Tomcat certificate has expired, that call will fail. That request will fail. You would not be able to log in with extension mobility. Hey, that's a bad one, right? Because that's also a service. So you want to make sure that you regenerate your certificates before they expire. Now, that 5-year expiry for the self-signed certificates in Call Manager is not changeable. You can't make it shorter. I don't know if you could make it longer or not. I'm going to have to go investigate that because I'm actually not sure. If they expire, you can still regenerate them with the exact same process. You just want to get around expiring them in the first place. That just creates problems for you. If you're using an external certificate authority, oftentimes they will make it a 1-year or a 2-year expiry. And you've got like a 2-week or a 30-day window. It'll give you like a 13-month certificate. So that gives you the 12 months of operations, but it gives you a little wiggle room to get the whole thing renewed and all that. But they might be longer. So you have to ask the CA. Again, in my lab, when I am building CA signed certificates for my systems, my Expressways are a good example. I used a 10-year certificate, right? Just because I wanted to be able to install my certificates on my systems and just not worry about it again. But it's an important thing in a production environment. And what else was I going to say about that? Oh, when you renew your certificates that are signed by a certificate authority, you have 2 choices. You can renew the certificate and have the system, the CA, generate a new public-private key pair. Or when you renew your certificate, you can have it keep the same key pair. And generally speaking, you want to have it keep the same key pair unless you think you might have been compromised. And the reason for that is all these systems that already trust the public-private key pair, you just want to leave it alone. So again, it's just something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about certificate regeneration. When you go into the operating system GUI and you're going to regenerate one of your certificates, the problem you're trying to get around is this. I'm just going through and I'm clicking through and let's just get this done, right? So I regenerate, let's say, the call manager certificate. And then the very next thing I regenerate is the TFTP certificate. If I do both of those back to back and don't allow the first process to complete before I start the second process, my ITL files are going to start getting interfered with because I'm going to regenerate the TFTP, which affects the ITL, but the call manager certificate, the server that these phones are supposed to trust, that regeneration process has not completed yet, and so it's not included in the new ITL, and suddenly my phones aren't going to work anymore. So this was a known issue back in, I want to say Call Manager 9-ish, something. It was pretty early. So there is now a timer. If you need to regenerate a bunch of certificates, be aware that if you start the regeneration process for one, a timer starts. The system will wait a full 5 minutes before it allows you to begin the process of regenerating a new certificate. Don't be surprised if this happens. And this is purposeful, and it's a good thing. It gives time for the regeneration to complete and for the regenerated certificate to now propagate. And keep in mind, when we're regenerating the certificates, we're just renewing them. And again, with the same public-private key pair. And so this means that they are already trusted by the other systems. It's just a matter of with the new expiry and all that good stuff. So if you're going through that process, just something to keep in mind. Anytime you regenerate a certificate, you'll want to restart any services. Now, the special case is the ITL recovery certificate. One of the reasons you may need to generate new certificates on a call manager is if you change like the host name of the call manager. You change it from a host name to an FQDN, for instance, or you just change the host name or whatever. That will affect all of the services running, Tomcat, call manager, and all of those have to be regenerated. The ITL recovery cert is not affected by that name change. That ITL recovery certificate, in fact, is used by the system to allow the phones via TVS to go trust this new name. Because if a phone cannot verify the identity of the server it's trying to talk to, because its ITL says don't trust this guy, the phone will check in with the ITL recovery certificate and say, is this new information okay? The ITL recovery certificate, which is already in the phone, will go, yes, this digital signature is still good because I know the old guy, and so you can trust the new guy. And that way the phones will continue to operate even if you have things like name changes. You do still have to restart the cluster, but the phones at least will still work. This also means that one of the methods you can use to migrate phones from an old cluster to a new cluster, we're going to be seeing how to do bulk certificate management here in a minute. And so to migrate phones from the old server to the new server, let's call this old and let's call this new, is on the new server, I would do bulk certificate management, basically exporting my certificates as a single bulk PKCS 12 certificate. And then I would upload it into the old system, reboot my phones. These certificates are now part of the ITL for the phones. The key thing in there, what do you know, is the ITL recovery certificate is part of that bulk. And also the call manager, or the Tomcat, is it called Tomcat? Yeah, it's a call manager service. It's the Tomcat that's then imported as a call manager trust or a call manager server that's imported as a call manager trust. I'd have to go back and look at the documentation. Anyway, bottom line is, if you're going to be moving certificates from one cluster to another cluster, one of the methods, as we will see in a minute, is to do bulk certificate export, consolidation, and then import into the old system. Or you can go to all of the TFTP servers in the new cluster, get the call manager certificate and the call manager certificate and the ITL recovery certificate, and then manually import those into the old cluster as call manager trust and then ITL. And then you can, the phones will recognize the new cluster. If you do end up having to regenerate the ITL recovery certificate, and there are a few use cases for this, the ITL recovery certificate itself is not a self-signed certificate. It is signed by the call manager cert. So if you regenerate the ITL recovery cert, other than restarting the TVS service, which you would still have to do, you also have to get this certificate signed by the call manager certificate, and that's this. It's CTL. If you're doing a mixed mode, that's util CTL reset local key also. So let's take a look at that process. I'm going to go into the old one. Right, so I go into certificate management and I can do a find. I'm going to grab the IPsec certificate because I don't care about that one in this particular system. There we go. Right, so let's say the IPsec trust. You can click on that. And oh, it doesn't let me regenerate from here. Oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that. Am I just picking the wrong one? Oh, that's right, because you don't regenerate a trust certificate, you regenerate a regular certificate. I should have just picked IPsec. Yeah, I don't want to regenerate this one. Yeah, you can see the regenerate button though. Excuse me. And you would click that and it would regenerate it and then signing. So I'm going to just leave that alone. I don't want to mess up my system. Questions about certificate regeneration, questions about migrating phones from old to new. Actually, with regards to migrating phones, and just because certificates are always a big thing with us, migrating phones from old to new, the recommended practice for a bunch of years. So Call Manager 8 is when they started doing the security by default. And, and I don't know if you're aware, there's a enterprise parameter called rollback to pre-8 security. And what that does is it blanks out the ITL file. The ITL file becomes null. And because that's null, the phone will trust anybody. So that's one of the ways that you can do a migration of phones. You do the rollback to pre-8, you restart all your devices, all the devices download the new ITL file, which is now blank. Now the phones can be migrated. Starting with Call Manager 12, and more importantly, if you are doing a secure cluster, a mixed mode cluster, you don't want to do that. That's no longer the recommended practice. One of these other methods of getting your phones to trust the new cluster are the recommended practices now. Okay. So, I have all these certs out there. Some of them are CA signed, some are not. It would be lovely if I could check in and be told perhaps that I'm going to have a certificate that's going to expire. Yes, there is a certificate monitoring service. It is a network service. It's on by default. You can turn it off. Don't do that. The certificate monitoring service runs every 24 hours, and it checks the current status of the certificates. It will check for approaching expiry and will let you know. And there is also a process as part of that is it will check for revoked certificates and expired certificates. And it will go in and revoke expired certificates. That's actually what I wanted to say about that. So this feature generates alerts into the real-time monitoring tool, security certificate monitor. So it's on by default. If any time I make a change here and I click save, that starts a new 24-hour period, by the way. So, if it's now 11:40 a.m. East Coast time. If I did a save now, this would be the new 24-hour mark at which it would do its checks. But notice, enable email notification. You can set this up in Call Manager here. You can also set this up in the real-time monitoring tool. You do have to have already set the system up for SMTP and given it a send email address and all that good stuff. But then it can also email you this information. So you can just go in and check it in the real-time monitoring tool on a regular basis if you want to, or you can go in here and have it emailed to you. So either one. I love that they have that it's just sort of there. You don't have to do anything to magically make that work. I think that's about all I have to say about that. Okay. Now, everybody's favorite, bulk certificate management. Used for, again, phone migrations. There are certain features like extension mobility cross cluster that you would want to have the servers trust each other. The different clusters trust each other. There are other features out there. One of the exceptions, at least as of the last time I looked, the intercluster lookup service, which if you think about it, of all of the different features, excuse me, I had a cough here. Sorry. Of all of the other features in Cisco Unified Communications Manager that are intercluster kinds of things other than like SIP trunks, the one thing everybody uses is the intercluster lookup service, right? For, UDS exchange for Jabber clients and, global dial plan replication, all that good stuff. The ILS service does not recognize the certificate, the bulk certificate generated when you do certificate consolidation. That's PKCS 12. ILS doesn't work with it yet. So you have to manually exchange the Tomcat trust. Excuse me. So I'd export the Tomcat out of one and I'd import it as a Tomcat trust on the other. And you would need to manually do this. I'm hoping someday that it actually works. Cisco's promised it a couple of times, but they promise other things too, don't they? So let's look at, do I have a slide on it? I don't remember. No, I don't. So let's just walk through it. So bulk certificates. Now I've got 3 clusters here, or 2 clusters here. I've got my pod 2 cluster and I've also got my pod 3 cluster. I have already done the certificate export on this cluster, and on my subscriber server, now I'm going to go into my publisher server here and I'm going to do the bulk certificate export. I'm going to be exporting it to an SFTP server. So you're going to have an SFTP server. You need to know what the password is for write purposes. And what you're going to do is go to each of your servers and export your certificates, your bulk certificate, out to the SFTP server. You can do a certain certificate, like I want to exchange just all the Tomcat certificates or all just the call manager certificates. Or I can export all of my certificates, and we will see this in a minute. Then I will pick, excuse me, then I will pick one of these clusters and I will go into its GUI, or one of these servers, I'll go into its GUI, and I will use that to consolidate. Once I've consolidated here, I will then go to each of the servers and upload from the SFTP server the consolidated certificate. And that consolidated certificate, it could be, 3 or 4 or 5 different clusters. The consolidated certificate will include all of them. Yes, it is absolutely possible once these certificates are out there, if I add a new server or a new cluster and I would like to export those and do a new consolidate, absolutely. And then I would just go into my systems and download the new consolidated certificate. So I'm in this server here. I'm going to go to bulk certificate management. Where is my SFTP server? You can see I've already done this, right? So where can I write to? Save. Once this saves, it's going to do 2 things for me. First of all, it's going to show me that it's the save was successful, but it's also going to show me what other servers are already out there. This looks like I already did this once. Oh, maybe I did. I meant to do it on my subscriber. Let's go do this here. All right, so security, bulk certificate management. Okay. Interesting. I did on the subscriber and I did the pubs. I thought it would have done the subs. So, okay. Anyway, great. Maybe I didn't do this part. So certificates type, you can select your different types of certificates. I'm picking all because I want to do truly a bulk certificate. Close. This will refresh, and yeah, it's not showing me the subs, but they're there. Okay, so I'm now on one of my clusters. I'm going to consolidate. Which certificate do I want to consolidate? I can do, again, a particular type, and it will gather just that type from all the systems that have reported in. Or, notice the ITL recovery. Or I can go get the all. Consolidate. Then the ITL recovery is also handy too, because if you think about it, like if I'm going to be, you know, I have a one cluster and I'm building a pair of new clusters, and I would like to be able to migrate phones to one cluster or another cluster. Great, let's do bulk certificate management and generate a bulk ITL. Everybody has it, everybody trusts. Okay, close. Now that I have a consolidated certificate, you'll note this magically, this little import button appears. I can now import, and notice I've got my pubs for my two clusters, and now I've got the bulk ones here. And again, which one do I want to get? I'm going to go ahead and get them all. While that's cooking, I'm going to go over here and do the bulk certificate management over here also. And because I have already told it where the SFTP server is, when I clicked on this menu item and went down and checked, noted I had bulks, and notice my imports here, which means I don't have to do the consolidation again. In fact, I really can't, not unless I add something new. Hopefully, oh, it's still cooking. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that as much anymore then. You would now see this. We could go into the certificate store under certificate management, and we would see all of these. And with that, that brings us to the end of my formal presentation. Anybody have any questions about anything we talked about today, or anything they'd like to see or have me demonstrate? The process is really no different with regards to Unity connection, by the way. If you have multiple Unity connection servers and you're doing HTTPS networking and you want them all to trust each other, guess what? Tomcat trust, among other things. Bulk certificate management works for that too. Boy, this is taking a long time. Okay. Anybody? All right. Well, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for attending. I'm going to hang out till this is done at any rate. And also the next hour is a Q&A hour. So if you have other questions, but really about anything in Unified Communications, it doesn't have to be about certificates specifically. Please feel free to stick around and just ask my question. Oh, that looks like it was just yay, yay, close. Okay, good. So now I can go into certificate management. And if I do a find, I will now see the cluster 2 certificates in here. So to finish my earlier thought, Lance asked if there's going to be a recording available of this meeting. Yes. My understanding is it's going to be out on our blogs, our area for a while. Then we eventually are going to move it into our digital library, and you need to have a subscription to our digital library for that. But it should be out on at least our blogs for I'm not sure how long. I'd have to go check. And that'll be probably next week before these are available. All right. Yeah, so now I'm on Call Manager Cluster 3, and here's the subscriber for Pod 2 and the publisher for Pod 2. And notice they are a Call Manager trust. It brought in the Call Manager certificate from Pod 2 and uploaded it into here as a Call Manager trust. Go ahead and trust this Call Manager certificate is basically what I'm telling it. So I can see those. Same thing with these other ones. There's the ITL recovery, etc. All right. Hopefully that answered your question about the recording. So yes, it will be available. Anybody else? Questions, issues? All right. Well, thank you very much for attending. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to be doing another one of these this afternoon, talking about ICE and stun and turn. Three terms that are thrown about a bunch if you are working at all with Expressway. What do they actually mean? That's this afternoon's seminar.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hi. I was just wondering, when would you have to restart or regenerate the CTL if you were in mixed mode?
Well, if you're going to be in, if you have a CTL, by definition, that is a certificate authority signed certificate, right? So whatever that expiry is. If the CA has signed your server certificates at a 2-year expiry, you need to regenerate within 2 years. And at that point, you're not regenerating certificates as much as you're getting them renewed by the CA. And then having the CA, you have to re-import them back into your call manager. It's going to have all the same keys, all the same information. So it's not like that's going to do a huge interruption in your cluster.
Okay.
But that's not a regeneration as much as it's a renewal. That's a slightly different process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.